It's 9 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. If we can identify for the record the committee members that are here. Karen, do you want to start?
Sure. Karen Swanbeck.
Horst Kritzer.
Patrick Van Ness.
Jane Plummer.
Scott Safford.
Go ahead around.
John Heron, Town Attorney.
Jason Green, Community Development.
We'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Nation under God, indivisible, liberty and
Remain standing, please.
Heavenly Father, we ask that you bless us with your presence here today. Grant to us the wisdom to see all things and grant to us the patience to hear one another with open minds and hearts. Grant us the strength to meet all present challenges. All that we do this day bring honor.
Here. Okay. We need to go over the approval for the minutes. Any corrections or additions? Sir.
I was going to make a motion to accept them as given.
Motion by Forrest and second by Patrick. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that passes. Okay, public hearing starts. Who presents first? Oh, anybody needs to be sworn in.
All those who are going to give testimony on any of the matters this morning, can please stand, raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Witnesses have been sworn. Obviously, as each item is called, it would be appropriate at that time for each member of the LPA to disclose any ex parte communications you may have had with regard to that particular item.
So we'll call the first public hearing is Variance 2021-0033 for 101 Gulfview Pool and Fence Location and Street Setback Variance. You'll come up and identify who you are, to either speaker, I guess.
In the middle.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I'm Rick Dobbs, or Richard Dobbs.
You can take that off so we can hear you.
I'm Richard Dobbs, my wife Becky, Rebecca. We're here to get a variance for the pool and the fence.
Okay. Do you want to explain anything on your side before the staff speaks?
Well, the staff wrote a pretty good background and analysis. If you've had a chance to review that, our house sits on the corner of Estero and Gulf Drive, and Gulf Road also is perpendicular to us. We have a really weird lot, which is not square. It has a very long run against Estero and a nice long run against Gulf Drive, and our house sits on the furthest west part of the lot. So that means the back of our yard is, I guess, whichever way you look at the house, it could be two different front yards. You have a front yard according to Estero, or you have a front yard according to Gulf Drive, and we're asking for the variance because of the irregularity of the lot. And it's the only place that you can put the pool, and there's plenty of room according to the background and analysis to put the pool in and then we asked for a variance from a 4-foot fence to a 5-foot fence. Also, again, and then there's vegetation that's already existing there, and in the recommendation, they want to leave that vegetation to the height of 3 feet wide and 4 feet tall. We're planning on leaving the vegetation, in fact, added vegetation along Estero, and then we would be putting in the fence along Estero, and then again along Gulf Drive, enclosing the pool.
There's no site plan or survey in our package. Did you give them a site plan and survey?
I only have.
Okay. We really need to have that. Can we just pass that around for we'll start it with Karen and let her pass. Thank you. Before anybody speaks, I guess, was there any ex parte communication on this property?
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Google Maps.
Okay. All right, and so not without seeing the map and where you might be putting it on it, so it's gonna be in the front yard on the right or the left, or where is that?
So the house is here, and then the pool would just be a little bit off to the right of the house. And the variance is basically putting the pool, closer to a stero, but the fence is really, I think, the main issue today is that you'll see where the red is where the fence would go. And you can see the proposed pool is also on that paper. I'm sorry you don't have that.
Yeah.
I will do a presentation.
The other thing is that just across on Gulf Drive, there's a pool just exactly like what we're looking for. It's got the variance right up to a stero. It's got the fence. It's a 4-foot fence instead of a 5-foot fence. It's identical to what we're asking for, just right next door to us on a stero. And again, they have 3 streets to deal with as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we feel like you've done this before, and we're hopeful that you'll do it again. Like me to take that back, please.
Any questions from the committee, the owner? Okay, we'll let the staff present. Welcome, thank you.
Carl Baden, Community Development. So we're talking about variance 2021-0033, and that's to allow a pool in front of the principal structure within the street setbacks and a 5-foot high fence yard. So property information, the house was built in 1973 and remodeled and repaired in 2007, so that kind of gives you a reason why it was placed where it was. The applicant bought the property in November 2020 and is zoned residential conservation. The variance request of the applicant is seeking a variance from section 341174B, table 34-3, to allow the pool forward of the primary structure within both street setbacks, and 341744B1 to allow a 5-foot high fence in the front of the property. Sorry. Here's the site plan. The first variance, which is they're seeking a variance for accessory structure to be located closer to the street right away than the principal structure, and you can see that the pool is toward. The second one is to allow the 5-foot high fence along the front and around a stero, which is higher than the 42. So our findings can be found on page 11 of the packet. Our recommendations are found on page 12 of the packet, and staff recommends approval with conditions of variance 2021-0033 for the pool to be forward of the primary structure in the fence location and height as shown on the plan. That's all I have.
Do you have a question?
I just have a question for staff. As I picture this pool, and I'm very familiar with the property and those drives, this is not going to obscure from any traffic vision from that corner there?
No, it shouldn't affect the visual triangle. You can see the road actually goes up further past where the stuff will be. It's right there on the corner, so it should be okay.
Thank you.
I believe in the conditions, the language includes that the hedge or buffer has to also meet visibility triangle requirements. So even if it's there and if it's a violation now, they have to correct that. So
Thank you.
that gets done through the permitting process, through the actual building permit process.
Any other questions or anything? Anybody from the public wish to speak? Close the public comment and bring it back to the table. Anybody ready to make or want a discussion here, or
I'm good with it.
anybody want to make a
Motion.
motion?
I'll make a motion to approve with conditions.
Okay, the recommend.
Yeah. The
Findings and
conditions recommended by
conclusions.
staff.
Findings and conclusions and the recommendations including 1 through 5 of the conditions for approval? Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 of us, 5. Okay. All right. Moving right along, congratulations.
This one's for 16th, right? So the proposed town council meeting will be August 16th, which is next week.
Okay. Okay. Correct.
Yes.
As you may.
There'll be a bigger crowd there.
Wonderful. Thanks for going first. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
For the draw.
Okay, our next variance 2021-0043 on address 2842 Seaview Street, variance to pool and pool location and street setback. Okay,
I
any,
apologize, the plans for the,
actually, there is some site plans in this,
Okay.
yeah.
I have some more.
Any partake communication in the staff?
None.
I used to manage this property
Oh,
for vacation rentals.
you managed this property previously, so you don't have to.
Know the property well.
Okay, so you know the property well, good. Anybody else other than site visits? Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, if you'll give your name for the record.
Yes, my name is John Cowart. I'm with Waldrop Engineering. I'm presenting in place of the applicant.
You're gonna have to speak closer so that we can
Sorry.
hear you.
I'm presenting as the agent of the applicant, Roberto Cadena. I do have a presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here you go.
So I'm here to give you a brief presentation on the application for 2 variances to allow an accessory structure, a pool, at 2842 Seaview Street. Like I said, my name is John Cowart. The applicant is Roberto Cadena. He is the owner of the property. I'm here with Fred Dravelich, another planner at Waldrop. Alexis Crespo was going to be here as another planner with our company. But so wanted to start with going over the location of the property and its surroundings. It is a single-family home surrounded by mostly single-family residential to the southeast, and multifamily residential to the north and west, with a private pool amenity for the Caper Beach Club condominium complex directly to the north. To the south is the Gulf of Mexico and the beach. Property is almost a half acre up to the coastal construction control line. And from the coastal construction control line, the house is set back about 8 feet with a porch lanai about 3 to 6 feet from the coastal construction control line. So the house does not have enough room in that area to build the pool that the applicant is desiring. The house was built in 1980, and the owner recently acquired the property in November 2020. The land use designation is boulevard, which doesn't really affect the variances we're looking for. It is zoned multifamily residential and environmentally critical past the CCCL. Like I said, that was conceived of in 1978. These are some images of the property from Seaview Street. The image on the left is looking towards the southeast. The edge of the pool amenity for the Caper Beach Club to the right on the left. And then the picture on the right is looking directly towards the Gulf from Seaview Street in the front driveway. This is looking through the front driveway to the northwest, and kind of shows you the edge of the pavement, and the property line is actually about 10 feet from the edge of that pavement towards the structure. And the image on the right is looking more directly north towards where the pool is proposed to go. So the variances we are requesting for this are similar to the previous presentation. Section 34-1174B for an accessory structure to be located closer to the street right-of-way, the Seaview Street right-of-way, than the principal structure. The applicant is also looking for a variance to allow the accessory structure to be located within the 25-foot minimum setback for this residential multifamily district. Here is an image of the site plan that was passed around. It shows the applicant is requesting a minimum 15-foot setback from the Seaview Street right-of-way, and maintaining all the other required setbacks in the land development code. And the pool area in question, in the box in the middle, is also contains the deck and any other infrastructure that accompanies the pool. So no other development will occur outside of that area. And so just to go through briefly the variance criteria in the land development code, requires that the variance request be de minimis in nature, and we feel that it is, and that requires extraordinary circumstances, conditions, and since the property is located so close to the coastal construction control line, that would prevent the construction of a pool in the rear of the lot due to its size. And the second condition, that the variance, the result of actions the applicant has taken. The applicant acquired the property well after the coastal construction control line was established. For criteria, that the variance will relieve the applicant of an undue burden caused by the application of the regulation. The requested variance is the minimum needed to relieve the applicant of the code requirements. So the space between the principal structure and the right-of-way is the only construction of the pool cannot, like I said, cannot occur in that 8 feet between the control line and the house. And we believe that the granting of the variance will not be injurious to the neighborhood, the surrounding Caper Beach Club. Like I've shown, the pool amenity for that multifamily residence is right next door to the 2842 Seaview Street property. So it's basically putting a pool adjacent to a pool. There will be buffers as shown in the staff report conditions. And I wanted to just show you some, like we've seen here this morning, there's been other approved variances for these pools having to do with the setback and the location in front of the structure in the right-of-way. So we received a staff report on August 4th that outlines some conditions, all of which the applicant has agreed to. First condition stipulates that there's no guarantee of the permit without compliance with the LDC and the comprehensive plan. Second condition requires a type B buffer, 15-foot wide to the north towards the right-of-way, and 7.5 feet to the west towards the neighbor's pool amenity. And the third condition, that the pool be constructed in-ground at the existing grade. And there were some additional open-air changing structures requested in the application, but staff and the applicant agreed that they weren't necessary for the project to go forward. And final three conditions, that the pool comply with the impervious surface requirements in the LDC, which it falls well within that requirement. No other pavers, concrete, impervious surfaces shall be located in the setbacks. The applicant is not prepared to do any of that. And finally, that the changes to this plan would nullify the variance, which the client agrees to. Well, and we conclude that we would like to recommend for approval these variances, summing them up right there. I believe that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, land development code, and the applicant has accepted the conditions outlined in the staff report given to us. I take any questions? Any?
Can we, since we were gonna make that correction when Carl makes his presentation, but there's language in the 6th condition mistakenly about the open air structure. And as the applicant has agreed that that's not part of the request, I just want them to, for the record, agree that we can modify that language. We're gonna recommend to you to take that language about the open air structure out of condition number 6.
So
It was accidentally left in there. It was removed from the staff
Variance.
report, but number 6, it says and open air structure.
okay, so we're just taking out the open air changing room.
Correct. I just wanted the applicant to, since he already agreed to it. They just stated that, but just to make sure that that condition accidentally references it.
Okay. Thank you for that correction. Okay. Any question of the applicant? My question is, the survey that is presented is from the edge of the pavement, and there's 15 feet back. What is it from the edge of the property?
That's about 10 feet from the edge of the property to the edge of that pavement. Pavement is part of the right-of-way, but there is no pavement there.
Okay. Maybe I don't know whether I should ask Jason. The question I have is, the bushes that are there existing, they're in the right-of-way. Is that okay to keep, or should they be moved back?
I noticed that on the pictures, so we can address that at a later point, but they look like they're probably in the right of way.
Yeah, they definitely are in the
There's a
right-of-way.
fence, it looks like maybe a gate or something, and
Yeah. Does this property extend any further out than the Caper Beach fence line?
No, they're about the same
Okay.
on Seaview Street.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, we'll move to staff. Thank you for your presentation.
Again, Carl Bench, Community Development. We're looking at variance 2021-0043, and allow the accessory structure of a pool in front of the principal structure and within the street setbacks.
Needs to turn something on. There we go.
Look at Carl.
Just to give you a little background on the house.
Okay?
The house was built in 1984 and had building permits in 2020 and 2021. The applicant bought the property in November of 2020, and it's zoned residential multifamily environmentally critical. As mentioned, the various requests of the applicant is seeking a variance from section 341174B and table 34-3 to allow the pool forward of the principal structure and a variance of 10 feet from the 25 feet street setback. So here's the site plan, and the applicant is seeking the variance, like I said, for the pool to be forward of the principal structure, and 15-foot setback, which originally would be 25 feet. So our findings can be found on page 34 with recommendations on page 35. Staff recommends approval with conditions of variance 2020-0043 for the pool. And again, we have to take out the open air changing room. to be forwarded to the principal structure as shown on the site plan. Questions?
We usually measure from the pavement,
We measure from the property line.
You mean pavement around the pool?
the pavement of the street.
No, it's
Okay, it's from the property line.
property line, right-of-way line, they're the same line.
Okay. And do we have enough parking with for multifamily there? Because they'd be backing into the pool.
There's plenty of parking there.
Okay, I
30
just,
foot.
There's even parking underneath the structure.
okay, yeah, I saw the parking underneath the structure, I just didn't know whether they'd be able to get to it with the fence around the pool.
Yeah, no,
there's
sorry,
plenty?
yeah, it's just
Okay.
around the pool, it's not around the property itself.
Any other questions for staff?
There's not gonna be a changing room now, or there is?
There is not.
Okay. Thought, but somebody said changing room.
That's my fault, I left it in there, I apologize.
One, we didn't know what that was, and two, the accessory structures in a V zone.
Like the open air changing room, so there's no walls, that makes it very interesting.
Something
Okay,
different?
yeah.
That's totally VE zone.
Correct, the accessory structure like that in the V zones, we can't permit that at this time.
Okay. My only thing would be to check into the bushes and see if that needs to come back towards the fence. Anybody else? Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Wait, public.
Sorry.
Are there anybody in the public that would like to speak on this case? Close public hearing and, go ahead.
I'll make the motion, we accept the presentation as given by staff with conditions.
Findings and conditions and the conditions for approval that are fixed with the open air changing room strike through. All right, all those in, oh wait, that's first. Seconded by,
Second.
all those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Very good. 5-0. Thank you for your presentation.
The town council date will be in September. This one, I'm not sure which date,
Oh.
but we'll let the applicant know as soon as we can.
So no question really on the last case, but one comment. Glad you guys got rid of that open air again, asking for a variance for a specific use. I don't see how we can bring in other uses associated with that unless you ask a separate variance for that. I'm glad you guys covered that.
And so something like that, generally, we would probably look at, I mean, there's two different variances there, you're correct. There's a variance, the setback for the pool, and then a variance for the distance of wherever that structure may or may not. You're correct, that should be addressed that way. We don't like to and shouldn't be giving a blanket variance, and then the pool, or then that structure will be located somewhere within the area that the pool is allowed to be. We generally want to be very specific and structure specific, site specific, very distance specific.
Okay,
Good point.
thank you. Okay, variance 20210058 at 506-508 Carlos Circle. Variance for pool location and street setback. Any ex parte communication?
Google Maps.
Bye-bye.
Google Maps.
I have sold this property in the past, but not to this person, so just for record, drive-by also. So if whoever's presenting for this case, will state your name for the record.
Yes, my name is Jack Holsom, and excited to be here.
Good.
Because we're really excited to put a pool on this property, which if you know the property, it needs a pool.
Yes, it does.
But we're a little nervous about a couple of the conditions, so we're hoping we can talk through. Possible, Carl, to put the diagram up? Give everybody a visual. Everybody probably knows the property because right there on Estero and Carlos. We have that same situation where it's surrounded by street, basically, and the house can't be moved. Really needs a pool to meet its highest function. So we're very excited. We read the staff report. A lot of encouraging stuff in there. And then when we got to the conditions, one of the big
You can't walk over, you can point to something and then walk back, but you can't talk from over there.
okay.
You can go over there and point to something and then come back.
The conditions, as I understand them, require us to put a 10-foot buffer between the property line from the property line inward of our property. It's a small, really small yard. But that would all, we envision most of that being pool deck. So if you put that buffer in, we'd literally have bushes right up to the edge of. So that's a big concern. We family place, like, build a there and have some tables, some lounge chairs, and use it. So if you look across the street, all those homes are on the bay or the canal. All there is across the street is driveway, garage. There's no yard, there's no living space or anything. We're hoping that grace on this buffer. Ideally, we'd prefer, you see how big the right-of-way is? It's a kind of dwarfs the rest of the property. But if we could put bushes or the trees in the right-of-way, that would be ideal for us to tell us whether that would be acceptable or not. Otherwise, if we could limit that buffer maybe to 3 feet, we have to keep it on our side of the property line. The single row of bushes and the trees in there. That's something that I work. Same thing with number 5. It talks about impervious surface. We'd like to have the pool deck all be pavers. We'll have that be all one continuous thing to serve that buffer. I'm not sure I read the conditions correctly because this is not what I do for a living. So I know we have a gal named Kelly Johnson trying to figure this stuff out before the meeting, but you know how the hourglass sits and the sand ran out. So, we just appreciate your consideration to have a really nice pool and deck for that property. Believe that putting this in will make it 10 times more beautiful.
All right, well, we'll hear from staff on those 2 comments also.
Go ahead. Why don't we just do the presentation and we'll
Yeah.
address that at the end?
Yeah, that's what I mean. We'll discuss that with staff. So if I understand you correctly, you're asking for only a 3-foot buffer, and you're asking for pavers or whatever to go up to that 3-foot buffer? There's a percentage that you can cover is the issue, and
Yeah, for the drainage part, we know we have to comply with all the drainage. We want to have one type of deck surface and another type of deck on the pool, because it's still just a very small area.
there's, as I'm reading this correctly, there's a 17-foot buffer from the street to your property line, which is where the 10-foot of bushes would start. Is that correct?
The proposed conditions measure from the property line. We don't measure in the right-of-way or from edge of pavement.
17 feet is from property line to edge of pavement.
17
That's
feet
right away, yeah.
to property line. Okay, so there is a 17-foot setback to the property line, and then there's 20 feet from property line to the pool, so they would have to be How far in to start the bushes? I'm
If
just,
you look at the diagram, they're showing the pool being 10 feet from the property line. And then they want pavers around that big, but essentially you would be 3 to 5 feet from the property line with the decking around the pool. Under their proposal.
But being pavered, still got drainage and proper saturation.
Yeah, I don't know what the elevations are out here. I don't know what the grading is, so I don't know if that's a downslope right now or not. That's something that they'll have to address through building. There'll be drainage requirements that they'll have to meet, so, but, more of an aesthetic and encroachment into the right-of-way issue for us. We can cover some of that once Carl's presentation.
okay, I'll wait for the questions until after he's finished.
The town did put a big swale, 17 that widens up when you get, that's all basically a ditch. Whole area.
Let's make sure that we understand that that ditch is on
Right away.
town property,
Yeah, that's right.
not the, okay.
Right,
So,
understand.
You know,
that new or
it
is that the new
has
one?
no relationship to what the applicant is requesting. The question frankly for you all is, you know, the desire of the applicant to maximize potential, what I would call the utilization, versus the criteria in the code that says that you grant the minimum variance required to account for, assuming that they meet the variance criteria, and their desire to have a pool of X size with a deck of Y size conflicts with staff's recommendation of a buffer of A size.
And we did work hard with the staff to make sure we met many requirements as we could. We'd slid the pool over. There's no impervious surface on 5 foot back to the property line. That's minimize that variance request.
Okay, any other questions for applicant? Okay, thank you. Full percent.
Carl Bench, Community Development. We're looking at variance 2021-0058 is to allow a pool in front of the principal structure within the street setback. The house was built in 1968. There has been building permits in 1990, 2004, and 2017. However, this applicant bought the property in 2020 in its own residential conservation. Variance request is section 341174B to allow the pool forward of the principal structure, and table 34.3 to reduce reduction of the 15 feet in street setback. Diagram and back to 10. Findings can be found on page 63 in the packet. Recommendations on page 64. Staff recommends approval with conditions of variance 2021-0058 for the pool to be forward of the principal structure. Reduction of the 15 feet to
Then let's touch on kind of what the questions are. Is basically the recommendation is if you look at the site plan, it's not really to scale, but you can kind of judge the distance between the house and the pool. And if you look at, for example, the side yard, the 5 feet, and just project that out, they're about 20 feet, 15 to 20 feet from the house. So my assumption is that's going to be proposed to be pavers. And so in our opinion, that is not the de minimis impact of where the pool should be. That pool should actually probably be shifted back, which they have plenty of room to do that with that 20 feet of additional space between the pool and the house. You can actually slide it forward a little bit more if you pull it back because of that curve, which would then allow the decking around it and also the buffer that we're proposing. So does it make them shift? Do the conditions make them shift the pool a little bit? Probably. But it also is because there is room to move it somewhere else.
You'd move it closer to the house.
Yeah, I mean, there's about 20 feet there, 15 feet. I mean, maybe they can speak to that, what they think that measurement is, but there's about almost 50 to 20 feet of paver and outdoor area that they're proposing between the house and the pool.
On the thing, it's showing 3 feet.
Is there a reason why you get it closer to the house? I'm asking the applicant. You have to go up to the, you have to.
There's only 10 feet between the house, and the rear setback is 5 feet.
That's not drawn to scale.
Right, it's not scale at all, really, but,
That looks like 20 feet, if that's 10 feet. At least 15.
right, so the distance from the pool to the house appears to be obviously greater than the 5 and even greater than the 10 measurement. Again, we can't measure it out because once you reprint and scan and do all that stuff with these, it doesn't stay to scale. But if you just use the measurements that they're using, it appears to be greater than 10, it's 15 feet.
I justified, I'd tell the truth. It's written up in the diagram as it 10 feet from the house. Rear setback is 5 feet.
Okay.
So it's enough room to put a lounge chair and be able to walk in front of it.
But that looks, okay. Thanks for the clarification, because that looks, it's a big area.
Two is, it has a sun shelf on one end, a 5-foot sun shelf, and swimming area. So again, not all that big for.
Questions for staff? With regards to the conditions, the impervious requirement is a code requirement.
67%, yes.
Yeah, so unless they ask for a deviation from that code section, I don't think we can approve anything today.
You were not being asked to deviate or change anything. It was more of a statement so that they understood that a lot of people come in
I
and
think
don't.
they're requesting the ability to put pavers and make that impervious, and my thing is, it's not part of the application. I don't think we.
I think there's a difference between they would like to have pavers in the right of way closer to the street, not necessarily the 67% part. So it's a judgment call, I guess, on your end of whether that's appropriate to have not just the pool, because we talk about two different things. We talk the pool footprint, the water, and then everything else that goes with it. That's where, some of the pool activities and all that sort of thing, the walkway around the pool, that's pushing out towards the street. And that's what we were trying to limit some of, not necessarily the 67%. They still have to comply with 67%. They'll still have to do a drainage plan that meets the current codes. But variance is about where can the pool go? And then where does the stuff, the problem is that those pavers beyond the pool aren't subject to a setback. It is part of your consideration, in my opinion, because of the aesthetics and the location, and that's why we've had buffers for pools, and is this the right place? And that's why the code says not to have them in the front yard to begin with. So that's why we were trying to address that issue. So it's not the 67%, it's just, is it appropriate to have the pool here and also have 5, 6, whatever feet of pavers on top of that?
And then the other question was with the staff recommended buffer. That is a staff recommendation, not necessarily a code requirement. Is that correct?
Right, we specified the type B is a type of plantings, a number of plantings. The width we've tried to accommodate for site by site. So when they said 10 feet, we applied the 10 feet. The typical code for type B is 15 feet. So it's the number of plantings will be the same, but it's based on the space and what's required, what they need for their variance.
And again, typically a 10-foot buffer like that would probably have 5 foot of plantings and 5 foot of open space.
Yeah, correct. I don't know the exact count, but it's like 4 or 5 trees. It's,
From a spacing standpoint, we're not talking about having 10 foot of vegetation where they can't use that space. We're talking about probably half of that space that can't be used.
That's true, yes.
To your comment or your question about the 67%, to amplify upon that, if in fact at actual site plan, when they submit the drawings and the calculations, if there's a determination based upon those submissions that they're over the 67%, then either staff would require them to modify the plans to be within the 67, which would de facto reduce the size, or alternatively, they would then come in for a request for a deviation to that requirement. But based upon the information provided to date, which is, and considering that all that's being asked for is a variance to put the pool in the side yard, or closer to the road than what's otherwise required, we didn't ask for that information, but they will have to provide it. And proverbially cross that bridge if and when we get to it. But again, to the issue is really the size of what they're asking for now, this additional information of their desire to put pavers surrounding the pool, not necessarily in common, then it's in conflict with the otherwise required or recommended buffer, again, because it's that close to the road. The historically, staff has recommended a buffer that would not only provide the property owner some privacy, but shield, the pool from the view of people driving or walking by that potentially could be a distraction as they go by.
And I think number 5 is really what you're challenging and asking. The question to you is, do you want to allow, to your point, Patrick, can they be allowed to, some of those pavers in that walkway around the pool to encroach into the buffer? Or do you reduce the buffer? And you're right, you could have walkways and pavers within a buffer. There is spacing in do that. But we're trying to limit, this is the only time we can do this, right? To limit the activity related to this request. Normally pavers and walkways are not they're a permitted thing as long as you're under 67%. But we're trying to avoid
And that's what I was
overpaving.
trying to distinguish. We're not asking for variance from the impervious requirement.
Correct. It's a discussion of what do you feel is appropriate related
It's
to.
an encroachment into the buffer that you are proposing.
Correct. If you're okay with that for a certain amount, then, that's a discussion for you guys to have, but we were trying to prevent, buffer's the buffer, and the pool area is the pool area.
So, on the other pool variances, they only had a 3-foot buffer. Is it
On which ones?
the last one?
Oh, they've been 15, 10 or 15. The one that we heard on before was a 7.5 on the side.
No, I mean their vegetation buffer.
Yes.
Wasn't-
They're larger. This is the smaller one of the front. They're consistent.
Okay.
All type Bs. The one on Sea View, is that what it was called? Has 2 buffers. It has the street buffer, and it also has the side yard setback buffer, because I have 7.5 feet on the side, so that's what it is, which is actually greater than what the pool could be. The pool could be 5 feet from, those are greater. Try to be somewhat consistent with the type of buffer and the width to accommodate what they're looking for on these applications.
So the applicant stated that the buffer basically would come to the corner of the pool. Are you in agreement with that or not?
Yeah, so what you see on the screen and what gets confusing with these applications is variance applies to the pool, right? So the pavers, like I said, and the walkways and the concrete slab or whatever it is, aren't subject to setbacks. So when we do a variance, and what they've done here is they've basically done the pool water plus 18 inches, how we measure the edge of the quote-unquote pool. Everything outside of that is pavers and walkways and subject to that kind of stuff. So this, I believe this image, they've told me, is the pool plus 18 inches. Not including the paver. So they have not represented where those would be on here. They aren't subject to a variance. But we start conditioning things to kind of protect that visibility and use. That should be just the pool you're seeing on the screen. That's why if the corner of the pool is 10 feet, that's what they're saying is a walkway around that would then be in the buffer. There are three things, right? Patrick, correct? I think where your thought process was, there's reduce the buffer, not reduce the buffer and reduce the condition or eliminate the condition, or somewhere in the middle where you allow portions of the walkway around the pool to be in the buffer.
So just for discussion purposes, I'd be inclined to allow for paver deck walkway around the pool to make it around that corner. However, they've got the whole rest of that triangle area where they can configure their deck according to their property. They bought the property knowing that it was this shape. Mm-hmm. So, I do want to respect staff's recommendation for buffer. I think it's appropriate. I do think that it would be nice to at least have a paved walkway that you can get around the pool to that back area.
Don't you have to, by law, on a pool, be able to walk all the way around on pavers?
No, that's what the 18 inches are. Building department has advised us basically to measure the setback for pools from that pool edge of water plus 18 inches, because there's a safety factor, I guess, called out in building code, is my understanding. So that's what that is, something you have to be able to grab onto and be able to pull yourself out, 18 inches.
But I wouldn't be in favor of being able to pave pavers and put hardscape all the way to the property line.
I think 18 inches is a bit small for, if you're carrying a tube or a chair or whatever, you can easily, I've got a spot in my pool that I have to go around a pole and.
Well, we understand, and part of the issue is when you're looking at variances, it's the least amount allowed, right, to be able to provide it.
I understand that.
And when we were kind of confused with the amount of space that they had on the house side, why would you need the other side of the pool for lounging when you've got 15, 20 feet on the house side? So, we can get to the public comment and then discuss that further if you want.
Okay.
Okay, so Carl handed out an email, I guess was from a neighbor. I have not read it. I just found out about it this morning. You can take that for what it's worth. I believe they could not be here in person, so they provided a letter.
Where's the neighbor's house in relation to the property?
I believe it's right next.
The
Pool's on the opposite
Yeah,
side.
it's
Right.
where the pool is butting up to the 5-foot setback.
Which part of our consideration looking at that, we looked at that parcel. I don't know what their comments are or concern are, but this pool is behind, it looks like it's going to be behind the front facade of that house. It would be, if this was their yard, it would be their side yard. That was some consideration we gave also, is to make sure it's not projecting out forward of the neighbor's house.
All right, any other questions of staff? We'll bring it, anybody from the public wish to speak? Did you have something else you wanted to say?
This Carlos Circle, it's a teeny little street. Really no traffic. But again, I just asked for the practical consideration. A shortening of that buffer, again, we want it to be beautiful. Be able to have reasonable buffer along there, along with that huge right-of-way, that you, or that even for 5 feet, they're around there, but we'd like to be able to cross that part of the yard and have again, we love the variance. The variance isn't for that, it's just conditions that are more restrictive and down to 5 feet. I think we could still something that's really nice, usable.
Anybody else from the public wish to speak? Were you sworn in? Wait, excuse me, were you sworn in? Okay, could you come to the podium and if you could get sworn in? Can you swear her in?
Just raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
This has been sworn.
If you will give your name and address for the record.
Pretty wholesome. I'm his, so. My only comment is, it's really hard to picture on this drawing, but where the pool will be, across the street, there's not even a deck where people have a chair or, well, because you're familiar with the property. So, but literally, it's a very secluded spot where there's just garages across the street. We're not looking at anybody or being obtrusive in any way. So, just reasonable with that buffer. And I don't know what all the stipulations are for the buffer, but, we're all about putting a hedge in there. A straight line hedge would be, something very doable, and we want it to look nice. So if you're on that street right now and you look across the street, doesn't look nice. There's a bunch of dead trees and, so yeah, we want to make that side yard look nice.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing and, oh, did you want to speak?
I'm going to testify. I wasn't
Okay.
going to, but I would like to.
Okay.
You want to swear me in?
Okay,
You need me to swear? I'm a fact witness here. I think
Okay.
so.
Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir. I live at Robert Baran. I live at 457 Estero. And I got my notice yesterday of this meeting, and I wasn't going to oppose this because I think every property owner deserves the right to do what they want with the property. I live directly through there on the canal, on the other side of the canal. So when I look out my back patio, I'm going to look at that pool as it goes between the houses. The neighbors don't have a problem with the pool. Discussed it. What we have a problem with is the noise. This is a short-term rental property, and we're concerned about the noise. Now, across the street is a house that probably should be torn down. I agree with that. But the other houses are pretty modern houses. The guy in the corner's just remodeled his house. So, again, I think every property owner should have a pool, but we're concerned about the noise. So somehow there's got to be some kind of buffer out front on San Carlos. Now, I realize there's a noise ordinance, and I realize there's a short-term rental ordinance. Not sure they do, but I think this is going to create somewhat of a nuisance because of the noise. Again, I believe everybody has a right to do what they want with their property. I don't care about the size or the location of the pool. I care about the noise.
Thank you. All right, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to our public meeting or whatever it is, and bring it back for discussion. Anybody? I'm open to considering something more than 18 inches around that corner. I think that is a bit sparse for safety purposes. I mean, I think a lot of people do furniture and floating things. So I think that it would be safe to, make that a little bit larger.
I think we have, what the city attorney brought up about what a variance is meant to be and the criteria for a variance. And understand that there's a certain leeway when it comes to allowing a use and a reasonable use.
Right.
Again, there's always the opportunity to design the pool differently, configure things differently. And while I'm to be supportive for people to come forward, ask for those variants and get those uses, there's design aspects that they can work with. And I think that staff's making a fair recommendation to put a buffer there to address the noise issue. So when it comes to walking around the pool, I don't know if staff has an opinion on that or a recommendation and something that could be worked out, but I think right now there's room for adjusting the design of this, maybe making everybody happy.
I want to make it, Mr. Plummer, the issue of the 18 inches is not before you.
I understand that.
So, the issue was that if, to your point, is that if the ultimate configuration is an apron or walkway area larger than that, then it impacts and directly conflicts with the recommendation of staff for the buffer. So it's the buffer that theoretically you would reduce,
Right.
not increase the size of the apron.
I agree.
To Mr. Van Ness's comment, then, what staff is suggesting is that in the context of the variance that is being recommended for approval, then at site plan submission, in order to accommodate both their desire to have a walkway and staff's recommendation, is that then they're going to have to push back or modify the location of the pool to give them that leeway, and at the same time comply with the presumptive condition of the buffer yard that staff is recommending. And so how ultimately the pool gets configured in a manner that complies with whatever conditions you impose and the desires of the property owner would then be dealt with at the site plan level. And if for whatever reason that can't be accommodated or dealt with, then we may be back before you. But, you know, I don't want to speak for staff, but my experience is that issue, these types of details are worked through and resolved at the site plan level between the applicant and staff. What is before you is again, not to repeat myself, just the variance that's been requested.
I guess what I would suggest is if you were going to look at allowing for encroachment of the alt pool deck,
A 3-foot encroachment, just
if you
at
allow,
that
say, a
pinch point.
3-foot encroachment, I would, for whatever it is, I would request, if that's where you're going, then think about tying that to the separation, the distance from the pool to the house. Putting a max of what that is. I don't recall what he said, if it was 10 feet or whatever it was. And say up to a 3-foot encroachment at a pool maximum of X from the house. That way, if it ends up being really 15 feet, they're not getting
it doesn't
advantage
apply.
of, right, because I don't know what that number is, I mean, that's for you guys to decide, but there's gotta be a number that's reasonable, but is not overly done, if you know what I'm saying.
Okay,
That make sense?
you would adjust it at the buffer and only that area that comes around the pool being a maximum and a maximum of, I don't know that,
You can pick, I don't know what
I
a
would
typical
say, you know,
walkway
a
is.
3-foot
foot buffer, walkway.
Three-foot
encroachment into that
encroachment.
buffer
For
at
the
the pinch
walkway.
point. And again, saying the pool's gotta be, minimum 10 feet,
Maximum,
maximum 10 feet
or
from
12, whatever the number
the
is.
existing structure.
Would you be willing to make that motion since you understand what the verbiage is for it?
I can make the motion unless I'd like to hear if anybody else on
Sure. Does any,
the
I'm good
committee
with
is.
3 or 4 feet,
yeah,
but I think a buffer, Brent made a good point. I mean, if it's a rental property, you're gonna want that buffer. It's a must-have.
And to the earlier point, you can accommodate the plantings. That's why you do 10-foot buffer, 20-foot buffers. It's gotta have enough space to fit the plantings. If you know this, if you do a 5-foot buffer and put an oak tree in it, at some point that oak tree is gonna be way
I don't
beyond
think they
the
want
buffer.
to do that. I think they want to be
with the pool.
Right, so our only concern is we don't think it's in the spirit of the variance to take advantage of separation from the house, not really the de minimis. So that's why I suggested tying it to distance, what the actual distance is from the house to the pool. Have that encroachment up to whatever it is, 3 or 4 feet. If they end up being more, then that encroachment reduces. If they end up being less, then the encroachment goes away, but the decking around the pool gets bigger. So it's kind of like this box that we're setting. However they figure that out through pool design and all that, that's up to them.
I'm good with that. Any other comments?
I comment, because I'm familiar with the property going by it several times. It is bland when you see that area there and everything around it. We see those houses going up. We all know what we're seeing. And I really feel like that pool in that spot is going to make that end pop.
Yeah.
And it's going to be attractive and not bland. And knowing the applicant's other properties and what they've done with their other property, it's going to be something spectacular to see.
That's
I
good.
just know it.
Okay. So open for a motion?
I would make a motion for approval with the findings and recommendations from staff, and with one amendment to the condition where there could be a 3-foot encroachment to the 10-foot buffer at the corner of the pool where we've got a pinch point, and that the pool would be no further than 10 feet away from the home. If the pool is further than 10 feet from the home, then that encroachment exception doesn't apply.
We get to rewrite that one, Jason. Second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, motion on the table. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. This will go to the council on
September sometime, not, because of the budget hearings, I'm not sure which date is gonna be available, but we'll let them know.
Very
Send
good.
out notices and all that also.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Before you start on the next one, I think it's just, while we're thinking about it, the conversation about these pools, I think what you're seeing is a lot of pools and a lot of variances related to multi-unit properties. Probably, and my guess is related to short-term rental and other turnover when they're sold in 2020 all of a sudden. So that may be something we have to think about moving forward because of the noise. The noise has been a complaint for a long time, so. Standardizing some of these conditions and because that's what they're being used for. It's not single-family anymore, multi-unit short-term rental.
I can tell you that that Seaview property is, they're not putting it back in the rental pool. That's just gonna be for the family.
Okay, good.
I know that's a
And there are
fact.
some single
Certainly.
Yes. Certainly,
why I
we're
think
seeing
there's-
2 and 3 units come in
And a lot of the single-family ones are going into rental programs, too.
and what we're noticing is they're getting more ornate and just fancier in general, which is kind of pushing that resort envelope. So I don't know the answer. I'm just saying that's kind of the trend right now that we're seeing.
Okay. So, moving on to SEZ 202-10050, special exception for for consumption on premise and video arcade for adults. State your name for the record.
Good morning, Robert Variance, attorney, representing Susan Bahan, B-A-H-A-N. Susan couldn't be here today because...
Can you take your mask off so we can...
Yeah. Susan couldn't be here today because her husband is recovering some surgery. But she did ask me to tell you that she's born and raised on the beach. Her mother is Evelyn May. Evelyn May is that shop next door to this location. She's been there for as long as I can remember. Location on 185 they bought and they want to turn into a video arcade for adults and be able to serve beer and wine. What we're asking for you to do is to find that, unfortunately, the code doesn't allow or disallow for this type of use. It's just not mentioned. Therefore, we needed the special exception to do this activity. We're asking that you find that it's covered under the LDC 34-2141 sub B. It's a recreation facility. Commercial means recreation equipment or facilities not classified as a park, neighborhood, or park community, regional, or as personal private. I'm just reading off of staff's report. We don't specifically have a problem. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to tell you too that Susie is a member of the Safety and Traffic Committee, so she's involved in the community, cares about the community. We're okay with staff's report. The only question I have is on the last page under the recommendations. No problem with the 2 COP only. Conjunction with sales within the same business, no amplified music. I don't think they plan on having any entertainment or music. The third one is the one I have a little bit of a problem with. It says no outdoor seating or consumption of alcohol beyond the footprint of the existing enclosed structure. No outside seating. They do have room for a bench outside. That prohibit them from putting a bench outside for the public to sit on. But what I would like to see that modified to is there's no serving of alcohol beyond the footprint of the existing enclosure. It's another issue I have. If somebody walks up there with a beer, it should be on the person that has the beer, not on the establishment. So to say no outdoor seating or consumption of alcohol beyond the footprint of the existing enclosed structure, I think is a little vague. I think we ought to just say that there'll be no serving of alcohol out beyond the footprint of the existing enclosed structure. They don't plan on serving anything out there. They don't plan on putting machines out there. I just want to be clear what they're not allowed to do. Number 4, any violations of the conditions shall render the special exception null and void. I assume you're all familiar with 185 Old San Carlos Boulevard. I've been on the beach since 1985. I know it's gone through a number of changes. At one time, I believe it was a pawn shop. It's been a retail establishment. It just hasn't found its niche. It's just been all kinds of different things, and we're trying to do something new on the beach. I think it fits in with Old San Carlos and the rest of the businesses. Carlos. Not going to be a detriment to anybody. It's true there is no on-site parking. Evelyn May had a parking spot between the buildings, and town redid Old San Carlos Boulevard. Marcia Siegel George, who was the city manager at the time, made a deal with her to give up the driveway if they gave her a parking spot. That went along for a number of years. It just recently has changed. Evelyn is elderly and has a handicap permit, so she pretty much can park wherever she wants. But they do rent spaces across Old San Carlos because they have employees and stuff like that. Most of their traffic would be walk-up traffic from the other establishments. That's about all we have, is we're just seeking to open a new business at that location, which, by the way, has been closed for several years, I believe. I think it's leased. There's nothing special. Last time it was some kind of shell and shop or something. Questions?
I have questions for staff.
Yeah, okay. Questions?
Carl Benz, Community Development. We're looking at SEZ 2021-0050. The applicant, the establishment of an, wants to put in the establishment of an adult arcade with some retail and sale of beer and wine, a 2 COP, with the deviation from LDC section 34-1264A2, within 500 feet of Lynn Hall Memorial Park. Building was first on the tax roll in 1955, and LDO 2007-00038 was approved to enclose the existing 2 decks and add a roof over the sidewalk to create a facade that is consistent with the old San Carlos Boulevard redevelopment plan. Building permits in 08, 09, 10, 11, 14, and 18. Current applicant bought the property in 2020. Applicant wants to open an adult video arcade, which is not a current use in the town's LDC. Retail consisting of beach items, accessories, beer and wine sales, and consumption of beer and wine on the premises. Here's a site plan of what it will look like. Applicant wants to open an adult video arcade, again, which is not a use in the LDC. The LDC is essentially silent on the specific uses, but offers potentially similar uses and definitions as other communities. LPA and Town Council have the option to make one of 2 findings related to the also looking to have a deviation of LDC section 1264A2, which is sales and service of on-premise consumption. The establishment of an adult arcade with some retail and sale of beer and wine within 500 feet of Lynn Hall Memorial Park. Findings can be found on page 106 in the packet, recommendations on 107, and staff recommends approval with conditions of special exception 2021-0050 for consumption on premise with beer and wine, 2 CO.
Just to supplement that, what you don't see in there is a recommendation for the adult video arcade, not knowing whether it's a permitted use or not. So that's kind of the second part of what's in front of you is the findings of that. And do you believe that falls under a definition or can be fit under that we think it may, but it's up to your interpretation.
Jason, I asked you prior to the meeting if you could bring us something from the code saying that this property doesn't have to have any parking designated. My understanding of all the other properties on that street, all the restaurants have to have parking, the hotel has to have parking, the shops had to have parking.
Correct, and the code allows them to provide on-site parking or in addition to, they can provide off-site parking within 750 feet and have agreements with parking lots.
Is there an agreement
So these
with parking lots?
properties that don't have room on site, then that, my guess is that'd be the only way to provide that parking then is to have the off-site parking within 750 feet.
And that would take up the public parking that would be in the, in the parking lot across the street?
Depends on which lot they are within proximity to and can have an agreement with.
We don't have any traffic counts or any road trip kind of things with this?
No, I mean, it's minimal. It doesn't trigger anything as far as the trip counts. There's not a study required. It's less than like 15 or 20. But as far as the parking, the code allows for them to provide the parking off.
If this was a beer, if it's just like a wine and cheese bar, same rule would apply.
It's for any use. And each zoning district in each area has its own changes in what percentage of parking. So the town's codes for parking say use has to provide X, and depending on which district you're in, has a discount. So downtown, I believe, is a 50% discount from that number. Discount gets less depending on the urban type zoning districts that you see from the downtown area. Total number, whatever that is based on the use, they have to provide. This is essentially a bar with retail, and so that's probably the the parking amount that we'll calculate when they come in for a permit for remodel or whatever else. Make sure that they comply with that.
We don't require any more language than adult video. I mean, is it sex? Is it, what is it?
No, so.
Yeah, there's a difference between adult entertainment establishment and so I think it's a, and they're certainly not to be confused.
If I can interrupt, that's actually addressed in your code. Adult entertainment is a use that's listed and you have criteria. Right. This does not.
The applicant has chosen, designated with the word adult because it is geared toward the traffic. The patrons are going to be primarily 21 and older, particularly to the extent that they also sell alcohol within the establishment. So that's why they're using the word adult as opposed to arcade, which might say a Chuck E. Cheese.
So children are not
Qualifies.
allowed in this by having the adult on this?
Well, they can't, there are rules and regulations regarding the service of alcohol and the presence of minors in those locations at the state level.
So if you're serving beer and wine and there's no food associated with it, essentially a bar.
Correct. So hence the reason for the special exception. So it was an opportunity, our discussion with the applicant was the use of the adult video arcade, whatever you want to call that, slot machine type stuff, whatever, I don't know the legal term for it, but that required a special exception since the use wasn't clearly defined in the code. They had to get a special exception for the consumption on premise because it's essentially a bar, not a restaurant. So that's why they're all kind of together packaged for you. We made the recommendation on the COP and not necessarily the other one because it's undefined, frankly.
So it's a Dave and Buster without children, and a different scale.
I mean,
Without
yeah,
food.
I don't know if the applicant wants to address that, but I don't know what kind of machines they're going to have in there. Obviously, they've got to be consistent with state laws.
That's the million-dollar question is what kind of machines are you going to have in there?
Well, and so we don't regulate that, and I believe what he'll probably tell you is most of the types are going to be regulated by state law. So it's up to the sheriff and other law enforcement to determine whether they're legal or not in each community, depending on what they are. I mean, he can address that, but I don't know what's our purview as far.
Can you give us an example? What kind of machines are going to be in there? Yes. Can you give me an example? What type of machines are going to be in there? Like are there slot machines for points or?
They're video arcade machines. I've never been in one of those places, but you
I
can
haven't either.
see them up and down the road where, I think there's one right on San Carlos. I guess it's past Summerlin on the right. People play video games in there, adult video games. And like I said, I've never been there into one of those, but what I understand is you pay money to play the machines. If you win something, you get a teddy bear or some kind of prize. Springing up all over the place. I'm surprised there isn't one already on Fort Myers Beach. Alcohol is just kind of incidental when people are in there. If they want to have a glass of wine or ham and cheese sandwich or something like that, then they'll be able to provide it to them.
Except there's no
The only
food.
other option is to turn it into another T-shirt shop. You think we have enough of those already? We're looking for something new and and I think that fits in with the plan, is something new and exciting for visitors and residents to have in that area. It's not gambling. The state will regulate all that. Town's right, the staff's right. This is going to be regulated not only by you, but because of the liquor, the state steps in and regulates what can happen and what can't happen. Machines are all government approved. See them all over town now. I can think of two of them off the island going north. There's one on the right and then another one on the left. Key 7, I think, is the one on the left. That help you understand it any better?
I haven't been in one of the places myself.
Let me tell you why staff struggle, right? Because
I don't know.
we are not in a position to determine the legality of what those are. It's up to the local sheriff and other law enforcement, and so I don't want to, I would call it Vegas style type thing, but I don't know that that's entirely what it is. I don't want to mislead somebody into thinking it's gambling when gambling if the sheriff determines that it's gambling. So that's outside of our purview and really to be able to, I want to be cautious on our comments on that.
So
Personally, I think he was kind of close, only on a smaller scale when he said Dave and Buster's. But Dave and Buster's has full bar and liquor, and they don't plan on doing all that. They just plan it on a smaller
It's on
scale.
video. Dave and Buster's doesn't do video gambling, so,
Gambling.
or redemption, or video redemption, or whatever they call it. But
I don't know what to call it yet.
There's no intention of minors, like staff said, it's for adults unless accompanied by an adult. That's why we say adult. I don't want to give the impression that we're doing some sort of carnival atmosphere or children. This is strictly for adult entertainment.
And I want to back to Ms. Plummer's question or comment. This is not an adult entertainment, as that term is already defined in the code, that one would think of definitions that are in the code for that type of use.
in a red light district.
The dancing, there's no videos, there's no booths. This is, when they're talking, it's an arcade, adult arcade. It's an arcade that is geared toward adults, not children.
probably what we should have done is,
Okay, you can't speak there. You either have
Yeah.
to speak on the microphone
I
or sit down.
apologize for using that term. I didn't mean it that way. What I meant is it's the game.
I mean, that is what it's called. I mean, that's what, in other communities, that's what they call it. So, and when there's a constant struggle of differentiating between the two. But obviously, adult entertainment's defined. This is not in our code. That's why it's more used for, that's part of your determination, not just, is it an appropriate place, but is it a use that was envisioned and allowed? Strange, we have ATMs as a use listed in the zoning code, but we don't have this type of use, so.
Any other questions for Mr. Brandt, since he's still standing? All right, you can go ahead and sit down.
You mentioned food, and just to clarify, food is differentiator between a special exception or not. If you're a restaurant, serve more than 50% of your sales are food. Defined as a restaurant, that does not require a special exception under certain conditions. Under the 50%, 49 or 2 requires a special exception. It's considered a bar, a consumption on premise.
Okay, let's close. Anybody here to speak on for public hearing? Were you sworn in, sir?
Hi, my name is Patrick Cooley.
Were you sworn in, sir?
Yes.
We're
We're
you don't
sworn
have to.
The group swearing, yes.
That's all you need.
Fine.
Go ahead. Say your name again, sir.
Okay, my name is Patrick Cooley. I'm a business owner that's located adjacent to the buildings that we're looking at right here. I'm located at 159 Old San Carlos as well as 161 Old San Carlos. Upon seeing this little sign, I went and checked out this adult arcade. It's truly, in essence, a small gambling hall where their prizes were gift cards to get around the money back idea. And when I noticed that they want to serve alcohol, you're turning it into the only bar that's in the neighborhood. All the others are restaurants attached to bars. I don't see why we're trying to turn Fort Myers Beach into a more upscale area with Margaritaville and all the renovations that have been going on. Every adult arcade that I've seen are usually in low income and not as nice and prevalent areas. I can't see it in the middle of our resort tourist section. That's the problem I'm having with it.
Appreciate your conversation. Anything else you want to state?
No, that's just basically it. I was just worried
Thank you.
about how that's going to affect our little corner of the world.
I understand. Thank you. we don't really have back and forth conversation, but if you have something to add to the
when you
record,
close,
go
I
ahead. Okay, the public is closed. Get back to discussion here. Comments and conversation? Well, I can remember back when there was a tattoo parlor in the, what is now going to be Margaritaville, and they determined that that was going to have to move off the area because it wasn't appropriate for the area, and that no tattoos could be, I don't think we can have one on, we can?
Oh, you're right, there's a separation criteria, right? There's a separation criteria between tattoo parlors.
And I do kind of agree with the person who spoke, Patrick Cooley, about the appropriateness of what it is and bringing it into what we are trying to build as a family island, or what we advertise ourselves as a family island. My concern is these, I mean, they're always very visible because they're in strip centers and they take up a great big section of them, and they go in and out of business like crazy. And it seems like a very small area to try to make that business a successful business. And I mean, I'm not here to regulate how somebody is successful or not successful. I just feel that the idea of what it represents is not what I think the town had in its view, or it would have been a part of the and with descriptions and rules and regulations to provide locations and conditions for it. I just have a little problem with the whole idea of that what we want for Fort Myers Beach. I mean, I don't know if we can base it on just our view of what we see the island as, or
Well, there's two, right? There's two components to that. There's, you could say, yes, we believe arcades, and again, the code doesn't even address children's arcades, right? So arcades in general are not addressed. It is consistent in something that is intended to be defined by the code, not prove the special exception for it. Or I think what you're saying is you don't know that it was envisioned for that, and that's why they left it out. Because again, that doesn't even differentiate between adult and non-adult kids arcades.
you know, the only other children's arcade we had on the island was when Pete's video was open, and even that was a family property. And I just haven't, just think maybe it would do better on the other side where the adult activities are, and you know, that a strip center where it seems like it would be more appropriate for parking and everything else. I mean, I can't see being successful in an area where they're going to be paying $2 an hour for parking, or $3 an hour for parking, or whatever, and not, you know, and sitting there for hours. That's what they do there. So I just don't see it as an envisioning family activity.
It's a shame that we ramrodded a anti-marijuana medicinal thing a couple of years ago, because that would be a perfect spot for that. And you go to Key West, and all the new shiny places with lines are those kind of places. It doesn't create crime, doesn't create anything. It's a crime shame, because I think that would be a great spot for that. That's my 2 cents. Given that, I think this is going to have to go to council, and they're going to have to decide if what's best. I mean, I don't know if the clientele there is going to spend money around the area, or is it just going to be a place where they just go spend their money there. I kind of like places like bars, restaurants, where people drop in a little bit, go another place, do some shopping. I'm not sure that this type of place is going to do that for that area. I don't know if that's.
Well, so I think
what we're voting on.
you're right, and your conversation right now is location. I guess I would take a step back and then ask all of you to maybe think about your comments on appropriateness of being a use that's allowed by the zoning code. I think that's kind of step one.
I'm not really sure. That's the $1 million. That's the other question is, does our code even allow for establishment like that?
Called out, and we gave you terminology, and the applicant quoted it, of a similar language is in LDC for Lee County, but they've added the video arcade language to that. That's really the only difference in the language between the two.
Let me give you some guidance. Our code and our land development code is set up, and it specifically states that if a use is not listed, it's not permitted. And then there's language that goes on to explain that, it's almost virtually impossible to list every use. The code would be huge in size, so therefore, the code does allow for the director, the LPA, and ultimately the town council to decide and interpret the code, that if there's a proposed use that's not specifically listed, but is close to or falls within, arguably an otherwise listed use, then, that interpretation can be made and applied. And that is what's before you here today. If you look at your agenda packet on page
105?
104, the staff report, page 3 of 6, starting with the town LDC section 34-2141 point B, that highlighted section is where staff is suggesting that if this body is inclined to make an interpretation that this proposed use or this use falls within the definition of recreation, commercial, personal, private on-site, private off-site, and public, would be in that subsection 1. If you all believe, if you're not persuaded that it falls within that, then your recommendation moving forward would be to deny the proposed special exception, because it doesn't meet the definitions, and it's not otherwise a listed use in the land development code. And then it would be ultimately to the town council to, at the request of the potential applicant or the community, to have the town council look into amending the code to, as the director says, specifically account for that use, because other communities in the area have seen the need to update their code to account for this use, and move forward with an amendment to the code.
Okay, so I think that what we need to do is address the definition. As it is stated on page 105, there are two findings basically to address the definition. Does the definition of adult video arcade fit into what they describe on page 104 and the top of 105? Or does it have to have a special exception to make it that? And if it doesn't qualify for that, is it consistent with the town's LDC to give it a special exception?
Correct. So you could interpret that, yeah, that seems reasonable. It's similar to Lee County. It's all kind of the same stuff, but the special exception is recommended denial because of location. Or you could say, no, it doesn't fit. We need to figure out if we're going to allow this through a text amendment. You can do both ways, really, or approve. Yes.
The first step would be making a determination that it fits within the definition, or similar to the definition that's set forth in the code, because the way I understand it, and Mr. Green can correct me if I'm wrong, is if you don't overcome that hurdle, you don't then move into then the application for the special exception at this location is eligible for duration.
Right.
So, I look at it from the standpoint of what's the definition? Does it meet the definition? And we know that the list of uses cannot be exhaustive. And we know that sometimes there should be some leeway. Mm-hmm. But when we start questioning what the use really means and what kind of machine's going to be in there and who's going to be allowed, I think that's enough to tell us that it's enough of a departure to not neatly fit into one of the current definitions. And if it's a departure, then it's got to be a policy decision. I think council has to make a policy of, is this a type of use we want on this island? I've got my personal opinion. I don't think I need to share my opinion about how I feel about those establishments. I just look at it purely from the standpoint of, does it fit the definition? I think it's enough of a departure that it doesn't fit, that it has to be addressed separately. And there's nothing that prohibits the applicant to come back and ask for that specific use. Unfortunately, we don't have a process, other counties have processes where you can submit a comparable use determination. Again, you have to justify why it's similar, and you have to talk about the use and go into great detail. And then it becomes a policy decision of the yes, it's a comparable use or not. In this case, we're not even engaging that discussion. So I think what our code says is if we feel it doesn't fit that box, then it becomes a recommendation for denial. That's what I think our options are.
Other opinion, other conversation?
Again, personally, that was the only thing I'd have, and to me, it's needed there. Sorry, I mean, I hear questions, and that's not what we're trying to decide here, but we have people who walk up and down, they walk all the way down to the end, to the back bay, and turn around and come back, get in their cars and leave. There was nothing there for them to do. There is some adults that would like to have that. I think that we could provide that with that particular establishment there, and I think it would be used, and it would be governed. I don't think it's going to be a sleazy bar or anything like that. I think it's an arcade. In personally, like I said, in Key West or where you're going, in my hometown, we've got those things. And
Question is whether it is whether the use qualifies in our LDC as appropriate according to these sections of what it would fit into, and recreation is the only thing that it could fit into, and so we have to determine under these uses, how do you see that fitting in as a use here?
Okay.
And so that's really more the question than, whether people might like to go there or not. But I understand what you're saying. With that in mind, do you have a place where you feel that it fits into the LDC without a special exception?
yes, because of the recreation. It provides recreation for that age group, where they would otherwise not have anything on that street for recreation.
All right. And you have any comments?
No, I'm leaning really towards what Patrick said. I think this is a bigger conversation, and I think just that, that was when I first read this, I was like, what's an adult arcade? It put, like, the hair on my arms went up a little bit. And again, not knowing what these machines are really like, I just think it's something that really we need to figure out. Mine maybe a little better.
So, Scott, did you have any comment?
I'm with Patrick. I think it's trying to put a big box in something that I just don't see it fitting. I think it's a further conversation. I think council needs to decide policy-wise if through bigger public comment. I understand that, I respect the gentleman who has a business next door, but nobody else here. We don't really have a feel for what the public wants. I know those places are popular and it fits a need for entertainment for that age bracket or that demographic, but again, I think it needs to be a policy decision. I just don't see it fitting in what they envisioned when they wrote the LDC. It's hard for me to wrap my head around putting this in that recreation box. I think the conversation should move forward with the town council for them to decide if it does. But my recommendation is that we're going to have to, as Patrick said, we're going to have a change of policy.
Okay. So,
Madam Chairman,
yes.
if we go to that realm, if we're saying that it's not that we disagree with the business, is that we do not have a clear picture of our policy as to whether that business is there or not, I could go along with that.
Okay.
Because I think it's needed.
And I think that's a fair assessment. Like I said, I don't want to place judgment on that business and if people want it or not. I think we need to have that discussion. We need to understand what the business really is, and we need to understand if it fits within our vision as a town.
Hopefully that, we'll send it on to council for them to make a recommendation, and hopefully the owner can be here and give more, input as far as what this is gonna be, so that they can wrap their head around adult arcade.
The other thing, we didn't really get an idea of what the hours of the operation is. I mean, if I just can't wrap my head around it. I'm sorry.
Agree with that, too. So, anybody want to make a motion?
Just before you do that, remember you have the special exception for the consumption on premise also, so you can separate out, but depending on what you're going to do, that needs to be decided, plus obviously your direction on what you think the code related to the use.
Well, I don't think
Section is.
that we have a real problem with, I don't have a real problem with consumption on premise. It depends on how it works out. I mean, because there's alcohol all around, and there's, there was a store, I think 2 doors down, or 1 door down, that had the wines that they made into, or the fruits that they made into wines or whatever for sale. And, I thought that was appropriate, because it was a great gift to take back to people and things like that. But I think that, I think it all really depends on the first thing to accept the second thing, as to what it would be. But I mean, if we need to make them separately, what's your opinion on?
They're 2 different uses, that's my only point.
I've got no problem with special exception. I mean, the next door neighbor said, hey, everything's a restaurant. Well, it'd be nice to, in that area, just have a bar. I don't see what the problem with a bar is, per se.
And really, the special exception associated with the 2 COP is the distance from the park. Again, if we look at it from that standpoint, there's a bunch of areas where you can drink that are within the 500 feet, so this is no different.
Right.
I don't have a problem with it.
Right.
I think you all are correct, and certainly so is staff. I just, maybe, and you can move it forward with a recommendation of denial on first, a recommendation of approval. However, and I would defer to the applicant, if the, applicant feels that the two are essentially, and as I understand it, that ultimately they're tied together. They can move forward independently, but the question really is, are they going to open up a restaurant at the location in lieu of the over 21 arcade?
And then again,
Word.
beer and wine sustain building without, yeah.
And retail too, didn't they?
Right, so
say
they have
something
retail
about
sales, so they
retail?
could do services of alcohol, consumption on premise, retail is a permitted use, so those would be all tied together. I'm not sure what else, but those are, the consumption, the retail's allowed. The consumption on premise is bar. Don't have to worry about the percentages, because don't have any regulations related to percentages of retail and consumption on premise. That is the special exception. If you found that the use was fit into the code, you're using the special exception process to also approve the special exception for that use. You can do one and not the other. Choose.
Not to rush the committee, but
Yeah.
I have to
Has to leave
leave
it in just
a few minutes, and I can leave if you want to continue deliberating, or if someone would like to make a motion, I can also be here for that.
Well, do you feel like we've had enough discussion to move forward to a motion, and so that we could have his vote included? Anybody ready to make a motion?
Patrick, make it.
Again, with no prejudice as to the use, I think recommendation for denial based on the definition of the code with what's it called,
recreation
commercial
facilities.
recreational use.
It doesn't fit?
Doesn't clearly fit that and needs further discussion and policy direction from city council. And then from a 2 COP standpoint, recommendation for approval of that deviation from the 500 feet.
With the recommendations and and conditions of approval
From staff, yeah.
from staff.
And before you second, where we can further discuss, unless you guys had an opinion on that outdoor seating part, really that was just service of alcohol and that sort of thing beyond.
Okay with that?
I'm okay with that too. People, if it's a non-smoking building or however they choose to do it, it gives smoking area.
It was not intended to prevent a bench. It was intended to prevent service of alcohol
Right.
and other things outside along, basically, which we don't think they have much room before they're in the public right away, so.
So if, does this say no outdoor seating? So we could change that to
Consumption of alcohol.
no outdoor consumption.
And I accept that amendment to my
Okay.
motion.
Can I?
Second.
I could, sir. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
When did you vote? Okay, so that was 5-0.
You? Patrick, you're gonna miss a lively discussion about level of service.
I'll talk to you separately about that.
That's it. What else?
Okay, so we closed the public hearing and moved
And
to,
before that will probably be also September. Again, not sure of the date, depending on the budget meetings, but
Okay.
this will probably be in September in front of the town council.
okay. So. Jason? Are we going to,
We're on administrative agenda.
okay,
Well, I have the, under community development reports, so you can do administrative, which I don't think we have anything, and unless you guys had some things, but you have LPA member items and reports you can discuss.
why don't you go ahead and do your community development, and then we can go to that.
Okay, so we'll go to number 9, jump ahead. And skip John when he comes back. So the memo before you was just kind of outlining the policies that are in the comprehensive plan currently related to levels of service. As we update the plan, those numbers and those levels of service will be updated, modified based on current data and analysis. But I just wanted you to get a feel for how the town's comp plan address level of service. And so I'll go through a couple of them. I'm going to skip down to water and sewer.
Got scary.
Okay, so the first one is transportation, second one is utilities. It's very typical that communities adopt a gallons per day. That's a target number to make sure that their flows are that or below type of thing. And so that translates into how much water and sewer do we need in the future. Town's mostly built out, except for incremental development. There's no huge developments, I think, out there to happen unless something like maybe the RV park, home parks get redeveloped someday in the future, but that's the only future development. What you do is you use that as a planning tool to say, if we're gonna have 5,000 new people over the next 20 years, how much water and sewer demand do we need to plan for? That's what those numbers are used. It's the same thing for transportation, it's the same thing for recreation. Recreation is based on acreage and uses. You can see under that policy, it talks about, for a community park, for each 7,500 permanent residents, have one centrally located recreation complex with 2 ball fields, 2 tennis courts, outdoor courts, play equipment, and so on. Some communities pick acreage, is what I was talking about before, and some pick amenities to measure that. Schools is something that's 100% of capacity and is actually will be handled a little bit differently than this. Those are kind of the main categories of what's evaluated as development occurs. And in theory, we're supposed to, every development comes in, measure against the capacities and availability of these items. And for the most part, your solid waste and your water and sewer are, my understanding, well within your levels of service. I believe schools are. I'd have to double check that. We don't monitor or manage that. School board does. And your recreation amenities basically describe what you have. Improving and expanding some of those that'll even serve a greater community. Did you have, I mean, I can go into more detail later on. I just want to give you an idea of how the comp plan addresses level of service, which ties back into impact fees and your capital improvement plan every 5 years. Again, as we talked about in June, the capital improvement plan isn't just impact fees, it's also other capital projects, but it's, your role is, what do those capital projects do to improve level of service, mostly for these categories?
So I assume that with the new utilities and sewer lines and water drain areas, that we are brought it up to this standard, if not higher?
Stormwater is something we're gonna have to address. The comp plan adopted what they call it, it's a temporary preliminary standard, and then there was supposed to be a master plan done, which I think they've done essentially for the island. And what we'll do as the update of the comp plan is basically incorporate that updated plan. Whatever the inches are, whatever the rainfall amount, whatever the elevations have to be, those will be updated in this, because the original, I don't believe it's consistent with set a new standard we go by. And I can't answer that question, but I'll try to next time for you, is if that master plan calls out improvements or if it sets a standard that then has to be met. I think it's each street and each side street and each area that's being done is improvements, not necessarily has to meet a 25-year storm event or a 100-year storm event or that sort of things. I'll have to check on that.
Thank you.
But new development does have to meet what's already adopted in state law, in Florida Administrative Code, the Water Management District. If you do development, something that's over 2 acres of impervious, if it's 2 acres of impervious and 5 acres total, they have to go through the Water Management District permit process. Under that, the engineer has to certify that it meets those requirements.
Wasn't the road, wasn't there a goal or a standard to withstand 9 inches at high tide?
There may have been.
I don't know if that's a statewide standard. I think that was their goal.
Right, so there's under stormwater, there's a sub 3. That was originally coastal flooding up to 4 feet above mean sea level. All lanes evacuation routes should remain passable. We may exceed that by that number. I'll have to check on that. But those are types of things that we set as a standard. Generally, that's local government's role and responsibility for that part of it, for the roadway, but also to make sure new development doesn't add to that or cause anything detrimental to that.
How does this tie in with the county? When the county, the road have different standards, or do we dovetail over them, or?
They could, and yeah, it's supposed to be a cooperation and coordination between. But private development is a standard that they have to meet also. That is, our comp plan mostly addresses roadway facilities and evacuation routes, ability issues. Private development, it defers basically to the state regulations for it. In a coastal community is appropriate. One of the discussions we will have, that you'll have as part of the comp plan process, is should we have a higher standard? Other communities have a higher standard, what the state requires. And part of that's a water quality issue or quantity. Those two things can get addressed separately, but some communities, I've dealt with Sarasota a lot, they have a much higher standard than the state because they want better treatment, higher water quality coming out of it. That may be something that we want to strive for, correct. Now, we don't have a lot of sites to do it, that will have to do it, but, retrofitting or redevelopment would be a critical part to.
I think that would be, we need to set the standard statewide for water quality. I mean,
Do we have anything for, any other comments on this? Do we have anything for administrative agenda? Okay, LPA members' items and reports. Start with you, Karen.
The only thing I just wanted to say is after taking a look at my calendar and things coming up in the next several months and knowing that my term on LPA is expiring at the end of September, I've made the decision not to re-up, just I was going to be missing at least 4 meetings coming up in the next year, and I know there's an awful lot that comes before this committee, so it's time for somebody who's able to participate in those. My spot, but I've certainly enjoyed it and a little disappointed the timing of some things, but that's just the way it worked out this time.
Or Karen, thank you.
One more month, don't let her.
Oh, it's all good.
You're not
It's all
off.
good.
Okay, Forrest, do you have any
I
comments?
have nothing. I sure miss Dan.
Yes. I was going to state that Megan and Dan both had excused absences, and unfortunately, Dan has passed, he passed July 1st, and surrounded by family and friends, and he has served this town unbelievably forever and ever from the conception. And we certainly would like to do something to celebrate him at the next meeting and honor him. And so I believe it was Dan, myself, and Karen that are up. Is that right?
I think
Oh, it might be Forrest and Karen and I don't know, but whatever. When is the date for letters to be in if we're going to reapply? And
No, early September. I don't know the exact date, but we generally, the process is a couple weeks to be able to get on the agenda for first meeting in October. Ring a bell, John?
Yes.
I think that council does the
they vote,
appointments
yeah,
for almost all the committees at the first week of October.
we need to have
We
that
need it like
on.
the 10th or 12th or something like that.
We should probably put that back on the agenda for next month, just to remind and ask people to think about asking people around them.
The town has already promoted some of the positions, because obviously even if somebody was going to renew, it's still open to.
Right, and also we definitely have an opening for sure.
Through Facebook and other means, but yes, please recruit
Communicate.
somebody, even if you don't want to be on,
Do we-
recruit somebody else.
we can just go online and get that form and refill it out again and resubmit for this now. Do we need to wait until?
Just do it now. Do
But
the
go
same
ahead.
There's
stuff.
not really a form, you just write a letter, right?
There's
There's a form. There's
There's a
an
form, yeah.
application.
Oh,
I had to do it for the Historical Society.
okay.
Yes, he did.
I didn't realize there was a form. Okay, I'll get the form, thanks.
Form and resume or whatever you want to as an attachment, and submit it as soon as you can, so we are ready to go.
Very good. Attorney items?
Nothing.
Okay. Items for next month's agenda.
There'll be several. We've had, over the break, had a lot of applications, similar to what you've seen, so September will be busy. I would like you to think about October, changing the date, or maybe not having an October meeting, partially because of, if we have so many new members, it'll be a challenge, potentially, new members. It's a challenge to get everybody caught up to speed. Also just the calendars at that beginning, so let's leave that up to you guys. You don't have to today, just think about it for
The September meetings still.
September's the
14th.
normal, yep.
I just thought of something. In moving forward with that case, I think it would be important for the town council to know how many spots would have to be required for parking for
Okay.
that, so they can identify where those spots would be when they do their application. That's all worked out, because I think that's important also. Okay, so you want to change October, but, okay.
Well, I think between now and next month, we should have a conversation about meeting date in general.
Okay.
You've started that conversation about the Historic Advisory Board. You want to keep this date for the LPA. Secondly, October is a conflict for me and for us in general, so either move that or have it.
The 19th. If you got 3 new people, we should have a meeting.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so that was my thought, was the question of 3, if you had 3 new people,
Well, just
It texted me already.
maybe have one variance so they get the feel for it.
I was thinking maybe we should do a better job of bringing them on versus just dropping them into a meeting, but
Right.
Well, yeah, that's true.
don't have an onboarding process. And right now, the way it happens, you get assigned on the 3rd or 5th or whatever it is, and then the next week you're like a day later you got your packet, is what happened last year.
Yeah, I think that we can have, we'll provide an orientation to the new members, but maybe what we do is, assuming everyone's calendar works, is to bring the new LPA members in an hour earlier and start the regular meeting an hour later than normal. We would spend that first hour with orientation. I mean, we'd have to notice it as basically as an LPA workshop for orientation purposes. Certainly all, the other members are more than, welcome to attend. And so we would, have that, orientation maybe the hour before and then start at 10 or 10:30, assuming everyone's calendar works. Question?
That's good. At Southwest Group, are they doing those seminars anymore, or that stopped with COVID?
No, there's an LPA public hearing session down in Cape Coral, last month, I think. I mean, there's some people
It'd be
that are.
great for new members to go to, because Dan Hughes and Matterholt and I went to that one in Charlotte, and it was, oh wow, this all makes sense now.
Different group doing those locally, but people doing them. And if we move the meeting, then maybe we could arrange something. One, it gives the new members, whoever they may be, even if it's one person, time to absorb instead of just 1 week. Secondly, we may be able to arrange something or can have some. We may be able to host something. Really,
That would be great.
because that's the timeline when when most communities have their new members come on. Doing that.
So are we talking October 19th?
Yeah, I mean, let's pick a week, and then we'll try to figure out what other committees are not in the way. I know this room's always full with committees and things going on. Generally, we run into something like, I remember the week later, there's always somebody on a Tuesday. But if we're okay with some time, like that week of the 18th, obviously not the 18th, the council meeting, 19th through the 22nd, we can.
Okay.
If you're okay with that, we'll just find the right time and date.
Okay.
And I'll double check with you guys after that.
I can't do it. I can do it Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. I'm out of
Okay.
town, 22nd.
Yeah, Friday's not a good time.
Okay.
Everybody's okay with that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, then 19, 20, I'll find a time and a slot for us to do it, and then that'll give us some buffer for any new members.
Good.
And I'll look into hosting something that hour before, hour and a
That
half
was the
before.
4th, 5th, or 6th?
No, the 19th, 20th, or
I'm
21st.
sorry.
October 19th, 20th, or 21st,
Okay.
somewhere, we'll find the open slot where committees aren't conflicting with times. It may be a later on the 19th, or it may be 9 on the 20th, I'm not sure, it just depends on the committee schedule.
I don't see any public, so no public to speak. I
I don't know if we went to John.
already talked to Jim.
Sure.
Was asleep, sorry.
Okay, so we will adjourn at 11:02.
Sorry. So our meeting next month is going to be on the 14th?
Oh, yes, 14th, yes. Okay,
Just to go motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn. Those in favor? Say aye. Aye. Thank you for that. I missed it.
Time to spare.
Yes, perfect. And that